Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how to begin modeling your character. So I've got my reference images imported, and one of the things I did was I just dragged it backwards, maybe having the grid shown. I just dragged it back this way, and then with this one I just dragged it off the grid that way. Okay, so those are the two things that I've done. If you open your file and you can't find your reference, just go to your Windows outliner. For whatever reason it doesn't display here. Go to your image plane 1 or 2. In this case I'm going to call this side reference image plane, and then I'm going to call this one front reference image plane. Now, with that being said, if you try to open up your file, if it doesn't display right away, if you try to open it up, just select on your image plane, or in your outliner select on your image plane, and then just relocate the file, and then go ahead and in all views, click in all views, and then click looking through camera, and it should boot right up. Otherwise it really should just go ahead and open right away. Anyway, back to beginning the character. Now the first thing I want to do when modeling is I'm actually going to turn the grid off here so I can see my reference, and I'm going to go ahead and start with a cylinder. Now with that cylinder, I'm going to go to my attribute editor, as we've done in the previous course. I'm going to change my subdivision axes to 8 because I'm going to model this at a low poly size. The next thing I'm going to do is shading, wireframe on shaded, so when I click off I can see my wireframe. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do X-ray. So now with X-ray on and wireframe on shaded on, I am able to constantly be able to see my mesh, whether I have it selected or not. Because without wireframe on shaded on, it becomes hard to see, kind of, especially when you start matching your reference. So I'm going to do shading, wireframe on shaded, so I can always see that. Now, another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hold right click and go to face, and I'm going to switch to my perspective view, and I'm going to highlight. I'm going to just select all these faces and then deselect these because it's faster than clicking each one of these individually, and then I'm going to delete, and then I'm going to run the same thing over here and delete. So all I did was delete the caps. Okay? Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to just scale this down, pressing R to scale, and I'm going to go ahead and move this into place. I'm going to start by following my reference image down here in the bottom left corner, and if you notice that from the previous lab, I've actually gone ahead and resized my personal reference images. I'm going to include a video on that in the previous lab, which I haven't made yet. Anyway, back to modeling, and from this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold right click and I'm going to double click this top edge, and I'm going to begin a box modeling technique. So make sure you have all of your faces selected, just double click, and then from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to run an extrude here. This is the extrude button, or edit mesh and extrude, or control E. And one of the things with the edges selected, you'll notice this slide tool. It doesn't allow you to go past the original size of this object. To fix that, over here in the top right corner there's a little hammer. Click that. Under tool settings, under transform constraint, on edge, do off, and then exit. Now you should be able to exceed that point. Okay, now with that being said, I'm going to begin my extrude. I'm going to press my little extrude thing here, and then I'm in the modeling tab, and then I'm going to press W to move, and I'm going to go ahead and scale that up and move it up, and then I'm just going to start to follow my original reference. And I may even bring this slightly up, and then I'm going to bring my vertices over here, maybe downward, and maybe bring these downward also. I also have some bumping out here. If I go to my edges, this doesn't need to be super high detail, but it does certainly help. I'm going to rotate this slightly, and maybe bring these two edges down just a bit. And I'm going to begin to start matching my reference. Now, this side matches up to this point, this side matches up to this point, and I'm going to bring these down. I just highlighted it, did a click and drag over all the vertices, and I'm not going for super high poly. I'm using my scale tool here, and I'm going to begin to sort of match my reference. Your reference could be different than mine. And I think that's a pretty good start here, and then I'm going to match this little fold here, so later on when I get into more detail I'll go ahead and include those little creases. The cool part about this is that we only need to model one of the legs. We're just going to flip it on the other side. I have a weird sort of leg on this side, so I'm going to just follow this side, and I'm going to begin again, go to edge, double click this edge, I'm going to extrude, and then I'm going to bring up and scale inward and drag off, and again from here I'm going to extrude again, press W, and because I have this sort of strange start to my mesh, I'm going to start to pull this side out, and then again I'm going to extrude, and I'm going to drag out just a bit, and G to extrude again, reuse the same tool as previously. Last tool used is G, is the keyboard shortcut. Press G again, and I'm starting to see where my knee is right here. I'm going to straighten this out just slightly, pressing R, and then I'm just going to drag the scale tool, so that should make it perfectly horizontal. And then I'm also going to rotate slightly. You don't need to get this actual detailed at this point. You can, it definitely will help, but if you find yourself struggling a little bit, just kind of run up the leg in a very simple manner, and I'll show you on this leg what I mean by that. Okay, from there I'm going to actually stop this point directly. I'm going to have one edge loop underneath the kneecap and one in the center of the kneecap. I'm going to extrude again, and then I'm going to widen this out. I'm going to bring this right up to about here. So this is going to be my kneecap region. Okay, and now I'm going to extrude up again and scale outward and bring down and maybe bring in just slightly, because this is going to be where another crease is, and bring this up and scale outward, and G again to extrude, and up to this point widen it out a little bit, something like that. And I'm going to start to pull this rotation here, and I'm going to extrude again, and this is about where I'm going to stop now, and rotate just slightly and scale it just a little wider. Now that being said, I'm going to turn my grid on one more time to make sure that my character is more or less centered, and he is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my side viewport. And basically what we're doing here is, imagine I was wearing whitey-tighty underwear, right? I know that's absurd sort of imagery, I guess you could say. But imagine, or like a WWF wrestler where they're in those like underwear tights. There's this, we're just going to use this imaginary line of where that line would come across, because this is where our leg starts to deform in our model, and this is where we will you'll notice when we get further in the model where it's going to eventually animate, deform, and bend. So we want to make sure that we have proper topology when creating this. So I've got my leg here. I'm going to stick with this as my reference for, this is going to be my leg for both sides. But the next thing I want to do is, with this leg on the side view, I'm going to do shading, wireframe unshaded, and shading X-ray. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to match my reference to my side viewport. And remember, when I was telling you when we were making our image planes, that we are going off the back leg, because the back leg, as you can even see here, gives us a better perspective of proper proportions on the far leg than it does the close one. If I were to go off of my front leg here in this perspective of this image, the scale and proportions would be inaccurate, and my leg would be I would be much taller, and my leg would probably be about a foot longer in proportion. So with that being said, I'm going to start to now, I'm going to just grab my bottom edge and I'm going to start to scale this out, and I'm going to have to move this a lot. So I'll do something like that. On my back portion of the leg though, I'm going to bring this one down, because that's going to be where like sort of the back foot goes. Again, I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to scale this to match my reference. And I'm just using scale and move, and I'm double clicking each edge loop as I move all the way up this leg. Now, one thing I would like to do as best as possible is keeping the center seam right up the seam of my pant leg. You'll see that. Okay? So that's where I want my seam to be. And then W. And then we're going to go to the next one. And the next one. And I'm just scaling these to fit. And the next one. And scaling and moving. So R to scale, W to move. And the next one. And the next one. And you'll see, and the next one, okay. And you're going to see this start to take shape. And on my back pant leg, I could match it a little bit. Maybe if I go something like this. And then the next one. And you'll have to remember that we're not going all the way up to the waist just yet. And the next one. And then this one is going to be the actual leg. So we're going to go ahead and just increase the size of that to give or take about that size. Now when we go back in here, I'm going to go to my object mode. You'll see that at the very, very top I have this really, really strange sizing, okay? That's because I was matching it to my side reference. What I need to do is I need to go back into my front reference and simply scale it this way. And I may even need to rotate it again, because I don't want it to go something like that. And one of the things I also want to do, and this is a point that I'm going to, I wanted to bring up at the beginning, but I thought it might be best if I show you now, is that this, it is running up pretty much the center of my body, but on my leg, at this point where the center of my legs are, I guess you could say, is it's not directly on this 0 point. And what we're going to do is we're going to mirror this object. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to select my image plane, my front reference image plane 1 or 2 depending on which one you imported first. Then I'm going to shift select this one, my actual mesh. I'm going to bring in my front viewport again, and I'm going to slide both of them so that this point here, this vertice, is right on my 0 line here, give or take. It just needs to be, it could be slightly off, but I want it to be close to being center. And that's really where we'll stop with this part of the leg. Now, going back to making it a little bit more simple, if you were kind of struggling with this, I'm going to add this to a layer, create layer from selected, and I'm going to hide this layer. And now I'm going to call this leg original. And if you're sort of struggling with this, I'm going to go ahead and create a new cylinder. We're going to follow the same exact thing. And if you don't want to get as detailed as I have, or you're just not comfortable, I guess you could say, doing it that way, here's just you don't have to make it perfect, okay? So I'm going to go to my face mode. I'm going to select all these faces on top and deselect these, and I'm going to do it one more time for the bottom, and all I'm doing is deleting the caps. So I just deleted all the top faces here. Now, with my edge tool selected, I'm not going to worry too much. I'm just going to scale directly like this, and then I'm going to, using the yellow one, and I'm just going to kind of run up this one, because this one's sort of skewed in a weird way. And I'm going to bring this down just slightly, and then I'm going to go ahead and run an extrude, excuse me, and I'm going to, maybe I'll scale this one in just a little bit more because it's like so, and then bring this off to the side, and then extrude up, and then maybe bring it a little bit wider and extrude again. And I'm going to go right below the kneecap, extrude again. And this might come a little bit smaller. It depends on your reference. Make this one a little bit bigger. Again, extrude. And bring this a little bit wider. And I'm going to start to rotate this actually just slightly as I come up to that, what I'm calling the underwear line here. Okay. And I'm going to extrude again. Come up to this point and do something like so. Maybe rotate it just a little bit more. And instead of using all of my edges, I'm just going to select these and sort of drag this out. Or I will actually do this. I'm going to bring this out. And I'm kind of trying to follow that same principle on the, the WWE sort of wrestling tight here. And that's all I really need, something simple like that. I would go back to my side reference, and then again remember that we are matching this to here, and I'm just doing this pretty quickly. I'm just selecting the vertices because I'm already in vertice mode, and I'm only using my horizontal scale tool, not my center scale tool, to scale all angles, just the center. And here I'll go to my edge mode because it's kind of skewed in a way. And then this one. And I'll drag this backwards. And then there's my leg for this side. So, okay, I'm going to turn this one on again. And you'll see I have a little bit more detail in the leg here region. I'll do shading, wireframe unshaded. Now you'll see it's kind of a little blocky. Ideally, this is totally acceptable. So if you have you don't have to go and follow every single detail. Whatever works best for you and whatever is easier for you is totally acceptable. I just showed you, it's the same exact method both ways. This way I just kind of covered a little bit more of the reference. I matched it a little bit more closely. And this one is just as fine as and acceptable as this one. So either way, totally fine. Create layer from selected. Leg. I don't know. Leg. Not original. We'll call it leg. Leg mesh 1. Okay. Sorry, I kind of had a brain freeze there. Now, on this leg here, I'm going to continue working with this one. What I want to do is, I'm going to turn off my grid for now. What I want to do is I'm going to do something called modify and freeze transformations. That's going to zero everything out and bring my scales to X, Y, and Z to 1. Now what I want to do is we're going to duplicate this leg. So in order to do that, one last step, we will do an edit, duplicate, and we'll do scale on X, -1, and enter. Now you'll notice that if I do this way, it's just right there. And I didn't technically, I mirrored it, but I didn't mirror it to the reference. How do we fix that? Okay, so I'm going to turn my grid on one more time, because if I duplicate it, I just press Control D and I'm going to scale -1 one more time. I already deleted it, and I just drag it over. I may not get this just right, just as it is, and there's no way to really tell anymore because I zeroed out this information. So it's a cool trick. I'm going to hold D. Okay, hold D. Holding D allows you to adjust the pivot point. Now I'm going to hold X, and I'm going to snap that directly to the center of my grid, and my pivot point now is lined up perfectly on X = 0. Now if I duplicate, Control D and scale -1, it's not going to match my reference perfectly anymore because I didn't model this side of the leg. But if I go here, you'll notice that they're both mirrored now. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with that so far. I'm going to turn wireframe on shaded off here, and I'm going to show you one last little trick. Because it looks so blocky, you can see these hard edges. What we can do is click your object, hold shift, hold right click, and you'll see soften harden edges, soften edge, and now click off. You'll notice now the display is showing it as a soft edge instead of this really hard edge. So I'm going to hold shift, right click, I'm holding both of them at the same time, soften edge, and now you'll see that I have softened edges on both of my legs. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to continue pushing forward with my leg original mesh from this point forward. If you did something with this leg here that I showed you, you don't have to follow your reference perfectly, you just kind of run up the leg. It's totally acceptable also, and I'm just going to delete it for now, and I'm going to delete this layer. And I'm pleased with this thus far. Now, if you ever run into one last quick tip, you probably already know this, but if you select your object and you're like somewhere in outer space and then you press F, F zooms in directly onto your mesh so that you have highlighted or selected. Okay, so we're good up to this point. As long as you're at a point just like this, I want to tell you to do one more thing before you save. I want you to do an edit, delete all by type, history, and that will reduce file size when saving. There's not much information in this file yet, but as we continue to work on this project, we're going to fill this file with tons of information. And here's one other point. Make sure that you save multiple versions of your file. I'm going to say that one more time. Make sure that when you're working on this project throughout the rest of the semester, that you save your projects in multiple different versions. So multiple versions. So I typically use a numbering system. I start with, I usually do a 001, 002, 003, so on and so forth. By the end of the semester, you could have, I don't know, 100 or 200 or whatever different versions, and that's a good thing, because you can, if something happens and your computer crashes and your files crash and so on and so forth, and you have multiple versions, and make sure you back up these files somewhere else, whether it's a hard drive, Google Drive, online storage, the cloud, whatever you save to, whatever your comfort for saving is. I personally use Google Drive as my online storage, and then I have a few different disk drives I can save to, like USB flash drives and things, external hard drives. So save your file, and I'm going to show you one more thing before we do that. File, set project. Now we're going to do File, set project. In here, I'm going to locate my file, and I'm going to press set. I'm going to find my folder that I want to set my project to and hit set. And actually, set project. File, set project. Excuse me. I'm going to save it to my Maya file here, or my Maya folder, 3D Modeling Online, and click set. And it's going to ask you if you want to create a default workspace or whatever. Go ahead and create default workspace. Now File, Save Scene As. It should go directly to that file set project folder that you went to, and I'm going to call this Lab 3. Modeling the leg. Continue. And that's all I have for this particular lab. If you have any questions, go ahead and message me on Canvas or email me. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.